where I talk a lot about how we can go above and beyond the 401k, the IRAs, the typical accounts that unfortunately are pigeonholing clients and individuals into mediocrity when it comes to long-term financial success.
Welcome back to the Money Seed Podcast. My guest today is Eunicia Perret. Eunicia is the CEO and founder of Excelstra, and she's helping people quarterback their financial lives toward a better financial future. Eunicia, welcome to the show.
Gabe, it's such a pleasure to be here with you today.
Eunicia, tell us, what is Excelstra?
Excelstra is a firm that focuses on delivering value to our clients through creative ways that historically most of our clients or most of the individuals out there haven't really thought about when it comes to how do we pay less in taxes? How do we minimize, or how do we minimize how much we pay in taxes? How do we maximize our investments? How, where, why, when we invest, and the reason for that. And then also, last but not least, how do we focus on this idea of maximizing retirement income and maximizing really our money when it comes to thinking about our own exit strategies.
Excellent. How did you get into this business?
Oh my gosh, it's a great question. I got into the business first and foremost out of necessity. My husband and I had a lot of questions when it came to how to manage our money. And because we were still young, while we were making a lot of money between the two of us, we were truly in the high income category. Most of the financial advisors didn't really want to pay us a whole lot of attention because we also happen to like real estate. My husband has been in real estate for many, many years. And so as you can imagine, most financial planners and advisors, they're not exactly incentivized by truly diversified portfolios. It's all about how much money do they invest. So early on, we kept asking questions and it felt like we were getting the same response over and over again. Long story short, we also had purchased some financial vehicles that were really not making sense, and we were in the process of needing to make some changes. And when we felt, and I felt, the true sales breath approach in terms of this is what you need to do and here's why, and you just got to do it and got to do it and got to do it, I told my husband, I said, this is not what this should look like. I had this pang in my stomach. And so having expertise in financial services, having been a strategy consultant in financial services for many, many years, I thought there's got to be a better way. So started asking a lot of questions, digging my heels into this world of personal finances, small business finances. How do we really make the most of our money? And I discovered that just a typical financial advisory platform leaves a lot to be desired. There are a lot of blind spots that people have, and frankly, they don't have an answer to, or nor do they know how to avoid them. And so everything that we do is focused on minimizing and or eliminating those blind spots.
Yeah, and let's talk more about those blind spots. Just think of your typical client right now. What are the most common blind spots people have?
It really all depends on the type of client. Let's say that we're talking about a business owner, and this particular example that comes to mind is one that it really is real because it happened today. Clients are exceptionally well diversified, everything from truly alternative types of investments, real estate portfolios, etc., all the way to the typical 401ks. And when it comes time for us to discuss what's happening within their portfolios, they truly don't have an understanding of what's happening. They have people that historically were managing what was happening within each of the parts of the portfolio, but when we had the questions and the conversations about kind of how do they resonate with this money, they didn't have answers. And so one of the great examples specific to this case is they have recently invested with someone that told them that they can help them invest in real estate. Well, they've been at this for several months, close to $200,000 invested. Deal hasn't closed. They keep getting strung along on, this week is going to happen, next week is going to happen. We're hoping to get funding next week. And so they're at the point where now they're asking the question of what can we do to not lose the money? So when earlier today we got on a call and started having conversations about what in the world was happening with this investment, they started working with these individuals before we started working together with this particular family. They basically said flat out, we don't know, Eunicia. We don't understand what this is. We don't understand how it's structured. We don't understand any of that. And they actually had created the introduction to this particular real estate team. And the owner of the team basically came back a few weeks ago asking the question of basically blatantly, are you looking to move the client's money? And the answer was absolutely not. What we're trying to understand is what's happening with the money because the client's losing sleep at night. And so it was very quiet. Now it's coming back up again. And when the client asked me the question and asked our team the question of what is happening, and we kind of turned it back around with some very, very basic questions, they said, we don't know. So now, because of the approach that we have, we basically really interjected ourselves back into the equations and with the idea that this investor group, we don't want them to think that this money is going to go elsewhere. But frankly, the client their health is taking a toll because they don't understand what's happening with this money, and it's hard-earned money, right? And so that's the kind of stuff that we see with clients, especially when they become more diversified, is they've become diversified because they've been sold into specific structures, specific investments, specific all sorts of types of deals, and they don't understand. And so they know that their money is doing something, but not knowing what the money is doing, not knowing their overall risk exposure, puts them in the situation where they feel like they don't have enough, they don't know enough, they're not going to be okay in retirement. And it's the same whether we're dealing with super successful business owners or we're dealing with high paid, high earning W-2s that don't have the time to decipher what's happening or what should they be doing going above and beyond their 401k or IRAs or 529s or whatever types of plans that they've been put in.
Yeah, so it really sounds like you are not encouraging people to invest with you per se, because I imagine most of your clients already have their financial advisors or their financial planners or other individuals or companies they've invested with. You're more like a quarterback, and I'm bringing that word back on purpose because that's how I introduced you at the beginning. But you're not here to take your client away from another advisor. You're here to help your client make sense of all the investments they have, their entire financial picture, and how they transition more toward retirement.
That is very true, Gabe. Very, very true. As a matter of fact, what we tell our clients is our job is not to displace what I call their financial team, should they already have one, whether it be the CPA, their financial advisors, financial planner, whomever, life insurance person. Our job is to help the client understand what options do they have, address their questions that have gone unanswered for too long. And oftentimes, even if they do have the answers or what they perceive to be the answers, when we dig deep, what they realize is that sometimes the choices that they made are not necessarily aligned to where they want to be or where they would have liked to be. And so what we do at that point in time is, because the client now understands, okay, here are all of the different options that I have access to, we're able to then bring together their financial team, again, whether it be their CPA because they continue to pay too much in taxes or they have questions about their investments. And it really at that point in time is dependent on how the financial team reacts. Oftentimes, the financial team or the person or the individual, whomever we're talking about or we're talking to, they're going to be happy because the idea is they're helping the client. What we're seeing in 95 to 97% of the time is there's what I call the knee-jerk reaction. Those people, the last thing that they want is for their client's eyes to be opened. And so when the client realizes, the idea is we're not displacing, we're not changing, we're not recommending anybody else, we're not bringing any ideas, any recommendations for investments or anything like that. But when we go through that process, and it's a methodology that's been refined over hundreds and hundreds of cases, the clients will end up asking the question of, okay, so why is this different than what I have? And how do we go about making changes? And when they realize that their financial team is perhaps not as incentivized to want to help and jump in to help clarify and sometimes fix the problems that they've created for the clients, that's when it's very easy for them to understand that, hey, the financial team that I've had this far took me this far. What's next? And so a lot of what we work with our clients on is addressing the question of, what am I missing? Oftentimes they'll have that question, they'll have that pang in their stomach of, I know that I'm leaving money on the table. I know that there's more. I hear about the wealthy doing things differently. Why isn't anybody talking about that? That's the void that we help fill for our clients.
If you had to compare, say, somebody who has had a really solid team for the last 10, 20 years, advising them on their finances, right? Let's say they're 60 years old, they're ready to retire, and they have been making the right decisions for the last 10, 20 years versus somebody who's just had a W-2, has been putting money away in their 401ks, and they're 60. What is the gap? Like, what are some of the things that the second person, the latter one there, doesn't know about?
It's a hard question to answer because we see very, very few individuals who have truly done the right thing up to or nearing that retirement. And the reason I say that is because one of the big components that a lot of folks don't really address is the whole idea of taxation. Taxation, not just for in the future. A lot of, especially from a financial advisory standpoint, a lot of folks will focus on the future, right? Let's just throw everything into a Roth or into the alternatives in terms of deferring or setting money aside in tax deferred accounts or tax advantaged accounts. But what oftentimes people don't think about are the impact of paying too much in taxes in the current year. So, for example, when we're dealing with a lot of business owners that are successful in their own rights, they're bringing in million, two, 10, 15, $20 million, and they're finding themselves in the highest tax brackets, and they're asking their CPA team, for example, what are we missing? And why do we keep paying the same amount of taxes or the same percentage in taxes that we've always paid? What more can we do? And the answer is we're already doing everything that is possible, but they're still paying too much compared to what they hear the uber wealthy are paying in taxes, right? The
Mm-hmm.
Amazons of the world and individuals alike. Now the question becomes how much money has been left on the table year over year over year. So when we look at someone that's nearing retirement, generally, if they haven't really looked at things with a fine tooth comb at least 10 to 15 years prior to retirement, we know without a shadow of a doubt that we're probably talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars left to chance. And so those are the problems that we fix for clients that already feel like they're doing or they've done a lot of things correctly. For the individuals that just rely on the 401k or the retirement plan, if they don't start early enough to think about what will retirement look like, how do we work things backwards in terms of the revenue streams that are needed or the revenue overall, the income overall that is required for them to have a successful retirement, now we're running into issues. But then again, as if taxes just can't leave us alone, we're getting back into the situation of, okay, how will the tax impact your future earnings or your future income in retirement? And that's a discussion that very, very few people actually have. And even if it pops its ugly head up, it's not something that gets addressed. So people will then end up being really close to retirement and they're going to be paying probably more in taxes in retirement than they paid during their working years, number one. Number two, oftentimes what we see the other issue is with how money is invested. The same way that money grows and the same way that money is seeded during our earning years is not maximized for how we're going to be taking money out. So if we just put those two together, you're talking about leaving as much as 30 to 40, 50% of, or paying more in taxes than you probably should. And then on the other side is at the same time leaving money on the table and not making the money that you've worked so hard to acquire and to grow actually go further along for you in retirement. And so the problem is not it's not very simple. It's in some cases super similar between the two facets, and in some cases is super different. The biggest thing is understanding where the clients are, what are they trying to achieve, because every single situation is so unique.
Fascinating. Uh, One of those rules of thumb I hear quite often is, the rule of like 25 or the 4% rule, where if someone has, let's say, $1 million in their 401k and they retire, they can safely withdraw 40,000 a year, right? Which is about 4% or 125th of that amount. Um, Based on what you're saying, there's a whole lot more to that formula, right? Because that formula doesn't take into consideration lifestyle or taxes or all that kind of thing. What would you change to amend that formula, or what would your advice be to somebody who's saying, "I'm good. I did the whole 4% calculation there. I should be fine."
Well, here's what I will tell you. It was a few years back that a friend of mine actually came to me and said, "Hey, my financial planner." It was at a time when she didn't exactly understand what we do, and she came and she said their financial planner basically said, "Hey, if we take out, it was right around 4% per year. This is what it's going to look like. And oh, by the way, we're going to be unfortunately outliving our savings in retirement when we are nearing 86, 87 years old." Well, that's wonderful, but here's the crux. She has two different aunts on her mom's side that lived to be well over 100. One of them had hip replacement surgery at 105. So you tell me if outliving her retirement in her 80s, even if it was in her 90s, would be sufficient using this 4% rule. So then the question is, okay, let's look at taxation. What kind of impacts are we going to have there? And let's look at what are the different ways in which we can actually take that money that they had saved up and they had grown in their portfolio and realign it in such a way that we can actually increase and augment their income streams in retirement. And so when we looked at realigning their portfolio just a little bit, what we ended up doing was creating an opportunity for them to basically not shift all of the money, just part of the money, to realign it. It would have basically put her in a situation where she would have never outlived her money. She would have actually had money to leave over to her daughter as well. The problem was when she went to their friend, who they had been doing business with, financial advisor, for over 20 years. And she said, "Hey, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to reallocate this pot of money to do this, that, and the other." Her financial planner, financial advisor, who was again a friend of the family, said to her, "Not a problem. I just have to let you know that I'm going to have to charge you a rebalancing fee."
Wow. A what?
A
What's a rebalancing
rebalancing
fee?
fee. Basically, it's a fee for the fact that they're going to lose part of the revenue stream, right? Because at the end of the day, it's all about the bottom line. And so that's one of the things that a lot of clients don't understand is it's not that people are ill-intentioned, but sometimes they just don't know. And sometimes they're not incentivized by their
Hmm.
institutions to necessarily offer the clients visibility into and access into different types of solutions and ways to make sure that they maximize what it is that the money does for them. And guess what? Sometimes it takes us outside of the financial services realm. Sometimes if somebody is very passionate about real estate, I know you have a lot of real estate gurus coming on the podcast, and I love it. They're not going to incentivize the client to say, "Oh yes, absolutely. It's going to be something more along the lines of real estate is wonderful, but let me tell you all the reasons why you should invest in an ETF real estate type of a fund, not an actual hardcore assets." Well, what if the person would be really good at hardcore assets and it could help augment their income stream in retirement? What would that look like? Or just their income streams, period. And so those are a lot of the things that we want our clients to understand, that not only do they have access to, not only do they have the option to bring in as part of their portfolio, but there is a right and a wrong way to do things. And so when done correctly and when the client is aligned, whatever it is that they do inside of their portfolio is aligned, those strategies are aligned to who they are as individuals, to how they see and they feel money, guess what? Now we no longer lose sleep at night. The clients don't lose sleep at night. They're peaceful because they know that, hey, I'm building something that's in alignment to who I am. And I know that I'm probably going to be able to leave a legacy as well. And that money is no longer just controlled by external forces, but rather it's controlled by internal forces, which are within the family, the walls of the family parameters.
That's it. I'm glad you brought up that example with the financial advisor, because a lot of financial advisors are incentivized to maximize, their commissions, right? And they're incentivized to minimize any chance of them getting sued. And a financial advisor telling somebody, "Yeah, just dump your money into 401k or some mutual fund," That's really good for the financial advisor, and it may or may not be the perfect, most ideal solution for the client. And so I always advise people, it's like, okay, if you're going to talk to a financial advisor, talk to a financial advisor that charges you by the hour, who doesn't care what they sell you. Like they're going to sell you whatever they think is the best, not whatever gives them the most commission. And so you want to align your incentives with the financial advisor in that respect.
I love that you mentioned that because one of the things that I tell my clients whenever they come on, that the one of the first questions is, so what is your recommendation, Eunice? I'm like, I have no recommendation. I don't even know where you stand right now. So generally, I'll tell them at the beginning, we will not talk about any sort of options until probably 4 to 6 weeks of us working together. And at first they go, what do you mean? We need to make some moves. And it's like, you have no idea. You've been stewing in the same pot for the last 15,
Yeah.
20, 30 years. You have all these big unknowns. I don't need you to take my word. I know that you're going to arrive at a common consensus based on how you go through that methodology that we've created, but the point isn't for you to do anything. The point isn't for us to sell you anything. The moment there's a discussion of why don't you do this, or how, let's have you consider that, it's a problem. And so I love the fact that you brought that up, because clients should never feel like they're buying anything. Clients truly should feel like whatever they're doing, they're stepping into how they want money to be working for them.
You brought up a great point about how many weeks it takes before you can get to a point with a client where you really truly understand their position. Tell us a little bit more about the client experience when they work with you.
The client experience is very unique. Oftentimes, clients come to us and they're just like I mentioned earlier. They're expecting that by the time we meet the first or the second time, we're going to be discussing investments and put your money here and let's make these shifts. And what they are very pleasantly surprised is that we take a lot of that, actually all of that friction and a lot of the uncertainty and the fear that the clients will typically walk into those any particular meetings with a financial planner or financial advisor in, and we set those aside. And the way we set them aside is by giving the client that free range to understand that, hey, we not only trust in the approach that we have, that methodology, the wealth freedom formula is what we call our methodology. It's grounded in those hundreds and hundreds of cases where we looked at what are the blind spots, what are the client's fears, how do they think about money, how do we get the client to think about their own money using a framework that helps them think through what does the money need to do for us, how do we want to, how do we think about the risk, how do we think about taxes. And so when we take it through that peel back the onion approach to start thinking about each one of those facets, by the end of the day, we end up really understanding what the client most aligns with and where he or she or they will ultimately go down the path of from a trajectory standpoint, or types of investments, or different ways of setting money aside. But one of the biggest things that it gives us is it gives us visibility into what is that domino effect, what is the common denominator that truly keeps the client up at night. And so if you were to think about it, it's the equivalent of going to a physician, going to the doctor and saying, I've got all these symptoms, but you don't really know what the underlying cause is. What we found is that once we identified that underlying cause and the client can breathe, they can truly breathe because they know that it's going to be fine and there's no pressure of them by selling or doing any moves at all until they understand what is it that they're trying to get to first and foremost. Then everything else follows suit. And now the decisions that they have to make are a lot easier and they're grounded in facts, not in emotion.
Nice. Eunicia, tell us more about, do you think the average American is ready for retirement? And if you want to generalize it, maybe what should the typical portfolio slash, life insurance slash trust, etc. setup be for like the ideal retirement for somebody, say, who's in their early 60s?
Oh, that's a very good, very deep question. We're not going to focus on numbers because that's different and relative for everyone, right? It's different based on who they are, how their lifestyle, where they live, etc. But what I will tell you is that There are some individuals that are perhaps more ready than others, but what we're finding is that even among the individuals that are truly in the top 1% or even top 2, 3% of individuals in the United States, because they have this keener sense of understanding that there's a lot that they've been missing out on over the years, they have this innate fear that they're not okay. So I'll give you a perfect example. One of the clients that we work with, it was a longer period of time before between the time we started working, talking, and the moment we actually brought him on board. And when we finally brought him on board, the whole thing in their minds was, we're not going to be okay. We're not going to be okay in retirement. And in their case, they're somewhere around 5 to 7 years away from retirement. Based on their lifestyle, if we were to work numbers backwards, which we have and we continue to refine those, they're going to be fine. They're sitting on well over $5 million, which is more than most families are looking at. Just husband and wife. Children are well off on their own. They're going to be fine. They have businesses that are producing revenue that's going to be coming in even after they retire. So in addition to the money that they've set aside or they have set aside as of right now, they're still going, that money is going to continue to grow. Revenue streams are going to continue to grow, and they still don't feel comfortable. So oftentimes what it takes, it's going back to the basics, to allowing the clients to have that breathing space. And it was amazing. We were on a call with a husband and wife, and at one point in time, the husband said, "Eunicia, you said something," and it was almost with this very stern voice. And at first I thought, oh my God, what did I say? He said, no, you said something. Let's talk about that for a second. And so he turned to the wife and he said, "Did you hear what she said?" And the wife said, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, "She told us we're going to be okay." And she said, "Are you sure, Eunicia? Because we're sitting up at night sometimes thinking about how it's not going to work." And I'm like, guys, think about it. Your house is almost paid for. They live in a very ritzy area on the West Coast. You've got all of this money set aside. You will be more than okay. And let's look at the numbers. So when we're looking at the numbers and working them backwards, of course they're going to be fine. But in their mind, because they're listening to, what media and everybody's talking about, you're hearing from people that are truly not going to be okay, scaring everybody else, saying, oh my gosh, it's doomsday. But at the same time, people that should be doing something about their future don't, because it'll be fine, right? We'll figure it out. And by the time they come around to figuring it out, It's already too late. And so it's a little bit of a paradox if we were to look at the different sides of the coin, but unfortunately it's the sad reality.
It is a bit of a paradox, but yeah, that's just the way the world works, I guess.
It is indeed.
If you would have to give one piece of advice to somebody, let's say in their 40s, who's just finally hitting stride in their careers, what is the one thing that they should be really thinking about?
Stop procrastinating. Hands down. If they've not already looked at where they are, if they don't already feel stretched with the amount of money that they're either putting aside or they're paying themselves. I love the idea of paying yourself. Just pay yourself first. It feels so good. Mm-hmm. If they don't feel that they're already stretched with the amount of money that, again, they're paying themselves, chances are they're probably not going to be okay. Going back to your question from earlier, there's a strong likelihood that they're going to be suffering and they have not yet realized that they're officially in catch-up mode. And so the longer they procrastinate, the longer that time goes by, the harder it's going to be to play that catch-up, and the harder the impact overall to their bottom line and really their lifestyle is going to be for them to be okay in retirement.
And what is the average age of your client? Like the first time a client comes to you, typically how old are they?
It's funny because I was talking to our team about that. We were talking with our team about that, and we're somewhere high 40s to middle to high 50s. It's kind of where most of our clients are. We do have some younger clients. Those younger clients are in most cases actually referrals, the children of our adult clients. the adult clients will basically tell their children, you need to do this, you need to work with Excelstra and with Unicia and with the team, because if you don't, you will live to make the mistakes that we did, which we then had to counteract and work much harder to dig ourselves out of. So that's probably what I would say on that side.
And do you wish sometimes that your clients would be younger than late 40s, late 50s?
I thought about that often. We definitely have the choice to work with younger individuals as well. What I find is that oftentimes there's this elusiveness about we're going to be okay, right? We're young and we're going to be okay. We're going to recuperate. We're going to work harder. We're going to pay down the house, pay off the car, raise the kids, send them off to college, whatever the excuse is. And then from a mindset perspective, I'm finding that a lot of the younger individuals are not quite as ready to assume, not ownership necessarily, but to say, you know what, we could be doing better. We need to take our a chance on ourselves, and we can't, this is not negotiable. We can't keep pushing it off. And so because that mindset is there, it's much harder to work with those individuals because in their mind, it's this whole idea, just like we were talking earlier, right? The financial services is not incentivized to cut costs for the client. So when we talk to our clients and we show them that one of the biggest pitfalls and one of the biggest blind spots for individuals is the cost that their portfolios are bearing, which in turn hurts them. I mean, we're talking to the tunes of most of our clients. We've helped save hundreds, if not millions of dollars just by realigning and reducing fees, frankly. And so when you have a client, I had this conversation recently with someone that's in their mid 30s, PhDs, husband and wife, doing really well. They said, well, we just can't wrap our heads around why we would pay for a service when we can do it for free. It's like what they didn't know, they were one of our very, very first time clients. And at that point in time, we were working with clients very differently. And I said, well, if we were to look at how much money you've saved, here's what that looks like. And legitimately, between husband and wife, it was well over $600,000. And it was at the beginning of their financial journey, right? But in their minds, they had the question of why pay? It's like, this is exactly why. Because if you work with anybody else out there, it would have cost you that additional $600,000 by the time you retire. No questions asked. How do I know? Is because we've seen hundreds and hundreds of those poorly designed cases come across our desk. And so that's one of the biggest challenges with the younger generation. It's their mindset and their readiness to say, you know what, we got to do better, and we got to do better sooner.
Well said. Unicia, as we work toward wrapping up this interview, tell us a little bit more about Excelstra. How big is the team, and how can people reach out and contact you?
Excelstra is comprised of several individuals that are working internally to the company, as well as a lot of strategic partners that have been thoroughly vetted that we rely on to help us deliver expertise in areas that is needed by the clients, right? Think of trusts, for example. Trusts are a dime a dozen, and you've got every single attorney that you talk to is going to have their own perspective on trust. So just in that area alone, we work with experts that can truly understand what the client needs are, not from the aspect of you need a trust, let's put one in place, but rather what is it that, once again, we need this structure to do for the client in the long run, for generations to come, for their legacy play, and then work backwards. So those are the types of people that we have. Those are the types of strategic partners that we have access to and we collaborate with day in and day out for the benefit of our client. And so the team spends to many, many, many individuals out there. In terms of the best way for clients to reach us, it's either through our website, www.excelstra.com, excelstra.com, or as you will share with our listeners in the show notes, would love for individuals to check out our free virtual masterclass, where I talk a lot about how we can go above and beyond the 401k, the IRAs, the typical accounts that unfortunately are pigeonholing clients and individuals into mediocrity. when it comes to long-term financial success.
Eunicia, thank you very much for joining us today and have a wonderful evening.
Gabe, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thanks for joining us for another episode of the Money Seed Podcast. Please remember to click like and subscribe. It really helps spread the message to other investors and it helps attract new viewers to the show. We appreciate your support. Thanks very much.